Welcome to Women Mastering Midlife, where we dive deep into the rich complexities of womanhood in our middle years. I'm your host, Victoria Bird, a pharmacist, certified women's health coach, and your guide on this transformative journey. Whether you're navigating perimenopause, thriving in menopause, or mastering midlife's many transitions, this is your weekly dose of expert guidance, compassionate support, and a judgment-free space to explore it all. Together, we will rewrite the narrative around this remarkable stage from being something to dread into a beautiful transition. Dr. Shayna Kaufmann is a clinical psychologist, certified mindful meditation teacher, decades-long Zen practitioner, and founder of Embrace the Middle, a company dedicated to serving women in midlife. Dr. Kaufmann is also a published researcher, a community leader, popular speaker, and former faculty at Alliant International University and National University. She lives in San Diego with her husband Eric and dog Nola, and treasures visits from their daughters Tara and Maya. Hi, Shayna. So thank you so much for being with me today. I binged your book. I think I finished it in a day and a half because there's so many things out there that tell us that there's this looming dread. There's this upcoming, catastrophic event in our lives. And there's so much shared complaining or misery or, fear of what's to come, that this book was kind of like a light in all of that, where we don't necessarily have to look at it that way. And it can be a better experience when we do embrace what's going on. So thank you so much for writing your book.
Thank you. And I'm so happy that was your takeaway, because that's one of the main things that I want women to really appreciate. So I'm just delighted that was the main takeaway for you. That, it doesn't have, it's not all bad. Yes.
And, it's funny because I have been sitting in a lot of conversation with all the, the hormone talk and just all the, asking what people's symptoms are. And it can become this negative vortex almost if you let it. So I definitely found myself reflecting on more of the positive aspects of what is happening and what's to come while I was reading the book. So it was definitely, we had a really gloomy weekend. So it was nice. It was a nice ray of sunshine in my house. That's for sure.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much.
So what inspired you to write Embrace the Middle and focus your work on women in midlife?
Thank you for asking. It was my journey, honestly. It started when menopause was kind of the first sign that things were changing, not just on a physical level, but even on a mental level with that door closing. We were kind of on the fence with the third child, and it kind of made the decision for us. So even though we had sort of decided it was the final, okay, it's over. So it was that piece of it. And then very, very soon after, at the same time, after that began, my kids were getting ready to launch. My mother was diagnosed with dementia. I had to retire from jogging after 40 years because my knees had wear and tear of 40 years of jogging. So there was a lot of changes happening in my immediate world that were happening, and some bigger ones that I knew were on the cusp. So I needed to figure out for myself a way to more gracefully navigate these inevitables instead of, like you said, coming into this gloom and doom of, oh, this awful stuff is going to change. How can I manage this more gracefully and more powerfully? And that, I drew from my meditation practice. I drew from a very real-time experience with a hot flash on a meditation cushion. And it kind of morphed into this approach of leaning in and bringing more presence and compassion around how difficult the period can be, just a softness around it instead of a dread. So my own experience led to the evolution of kind of a way of approaching midlife and a way navigating the challenging parts and opening up to the greater parts, the wonderful parts that come with age as well.
There are some benefits to it. And I think that, we go from being stuck in the weeds with our younger, young children, right? We're like in the thick of it when they're toddlers, and then we're driving them around as taxi drivers. And then, they're getting ready to launch, and it's terrifying that your role is going to be shifting that way. But there is some beauty that you can find in that too. So I cling to that because I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. So we're beginning the college discussion and the driving, and it's a little overwhelming. I'm not going to lie, but there's also the freedom that comes with it.
I was just going to say that when that first kid gets that driver's license, yes, it's terrifying. And oh boy, can life materially change in a good way. And it was only after my youngest daughter left for college that I even had the bandwidth to jump into this book with more fervor. Because even when you're not schlepping them here and there and they're not in the house, there's an emotional space that children take up in a great way, but it's still space that can't be allocated to other things. So freedom is a great word to describe that transition.
I'm looking forward to it, but like I said, I'm hesitant as well because that is also how a lot of us define ourselves is our role as mother. So it is nice to look forward and be excited about the future because yeah, that is definitely a transition I'm excited about, but hesitant at the same time. So one of the things that I really liked in your book was you introduced the SOFTT method, which is SOFTT. And I really appreciated this approach to any kind of midlife situation or experience. Can you walk us through the steps and how women can apply that to their daily lives?
Yeah, so it really draws from my 2 decades of Zen practice. And a lot of Buddhist practitioners have different acronyms, to remind us ways to approach challenging, moments or challenging periods. And I kind of added my own twist and my own order of things, and then also drew on something that's really inherent in women in midlife and beyond, which is wisdom. So the S stands for slowing down and giving us perspective. So it could be, we can take an example of a moment to bring this to life. Well, let me give you the overall, then we can kind of make it real with an example. So the F is to slow down and take a few breaths to kind of pull back and have some perspective. The O is for observe. So observing all the thoughts and feelings that start to go a million miles an hour that can become this just intertwined mess and bring us down some dark wormholes. So pulling back from that and observing. The F is feeling, bringing back into our bodies, which is happening right here, right now, as opposed to thoughts, which are usually past or future. The T is tenderness, the self-compassion piece. And I'm putting my hand on my heart because I can not even talk about self-compassion without putting my hand on my heart. It's so instinctual. And then the last T is tuning into that inner wisdom. So it's slow down, observe, feel, tenderize, and tune in. And that sounds very conceptual and heady. So I think it might help, if you don't mind, Victoria, if we just take an example for a minute.
Oh,
so I'll give you a very real-time one that just happened a few weeks ago. So my mother-in-law was diagnosed with cancer. She lives here in San Diego, and I'm a big caretaker role for her. So when this diagnosis came, the first reaction was, oh, crap, she's got cancer. And oh, crap, I'm back in the middle of a book tour. Oh my gosh, is she going to get through this? And then this kind of panic of, is she going to be able to make it through this treatment? How is it going to impact my life? Am I going to have to cancel course? What does this mean for my caretaking role down the road? So I got this news and I remembered SOFT and I just paused for a second and I just slowed down and breathed, just stop. So not stop, slow down. We often have an instinctual reaction to saying stop and we say no. So slow down just means dial it back a second. So I slowed down, I took a few breaths, and then I observed my thoughts. Is she going to be able to endure this? Am I going to have to cancel my book tours? What does this mean for my role as a caretaker down the road? What other help do I have to enlist? I started observing kind of all of the range of fear, anxiety, helplessness, all those things. And I observed it from a distance. I wasn't so caught up in it. There's a difference because when we're spinning in our thoughts, they have control of us. If we step back and observe them, we can see it more as an outsider and not get so wrapped up in the content. Then I brought it back to the body with F, which is feel. And I just tuned in to the heaviness, the anxiousness, the fear. I just became back into the present moment by checking into my bodily sensations. I followed that with my hand on my heart with, this sucks. This is a real hiccup in the road for her, for me, for my father-in-law, for the whole family. And I just acknowledged the totality of the situation as being really difficult for a lot of people. And then the last step, tuning in, the wisdom was, okay, what do I need to do? And for me, it was, let me look at my calendar and see what's negotiable. Let me reach out to my brother and sister-in-laws from out of town and see who can step in and help. Let me assert my own boundaries of what I'm willing to do and where I'm going to draw a line. And that gave me a lot more direction and perspective instead of just panic in a moment that felt very out of control. So it both gave me, it slowed my body down, it gave me clarity and perspective, and it gave me my next steps, which I needed to do for both of us. So that's soft. And soft can be in just any moment when we're just feeling off and don't know why. I think I shared an example in the book. I was driving to the gym once and was very irritable and agitated and didn't really know why and couldn't figure it out. And it's just not a great feeling. So I pulled my car over the side of the road. I kind of slowed down and took a few breaths. I looked at my thoughts, which were, why am I feeling this way? I don't like feeling this way. Why am I in this agitated mood? Brought it back to the body, acknowledged this is hard. And in the course of looking at my thoughts, I uncovered, oh, okay, it was this kind of email exchange I had that left me uncomfortable and uneasy. And that was what it was about. And then I acknowledged that was hard. And there's nothing else to do but just to have the clarity of, okay, this is why. Now I can go on my day. So that's soft.
That's a great example. I'm sorry about your mother-in-law's diagnosis. And I think that affects so many women our age. We are dealing with aging parents and aging in-laws. And the aspect of, how does this impact me as a caregiver? The first thing you think of, well, for me personally, is I do begin to spiral of like, oh my gosh, how is this going to impact the kids and all I have to do for them and my husband? Or, it's so multifactorial. Being able to step back, it also sounds like a very healthy way to process, to plan, to get everybody else involved. And I think that as we age, our boundaries need to be firm. And I don't think we're very good at beginning to have any, let alone hold them. So I think that is granting permission to give yourself the time to think, the space to decide how you're going to handle the situation. So I really like the method. And I think and like you said, you could use it for something just like driving to the gym, or something that is a much larger feeling and situation. So I think that's a really important takeaway from the book. And I definitely think that's something that with my clients might be a suggestion of, hey, this is a good book for you, for you to use and utilize these processes. So I definitely, the acronyms also stick with me. My daughter loves acronyms when she's studying for tests. So we have lots of those in our house. And I think that's a good way to remember.
Thank you. And I think I called it soft intentionally because it can be, like you said, such a demanding period, and we need gentleness because as women, we are in the middle of this sandwich crunch. And in my research, the sandwich demands was one of the top challenges for women in the middle decades. And we are more often in the caretaker role, and we're good at it. So it can be, and of course they want us to be the ones in charge because we're good at it, but we do need to establish our own boundaries and enlist others. And that's, for many women, that goes against our instinct. We just do it because we're good at it and we know how to do it, and they prefer us to do it. So you're right about the boundaries and the self-care and the reminder that other people can and should help as well.
Yeah, because not only do we have to do it all, but we have to do it alone and prove that we can do it.
Yeah. And that I think lessens a little bit in midlife too, is one of the things I found out, is that we become more gracious about not being perfect at it, and easier to say, no, I'm not going to do this. I'll do this, but I'm not going to do that. And I know that that's not your choice and your preference, and that might not be what you want, but this is going to work best, for me as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. You do mention in your book that we're the sandwich generation of we're in that space where we're dealing with the aging family and the younger children. In your research, did you find that very frequently as a big factor in women's lives?
Huge. It was in the top 3. It was the third. It was followed by physical decline, our own physical changes and challenges. And then second was death and loss. It's the first time that many of us are really confronting that in a real intimate way. And then the caretaking demands. And I called it the sandwich crunch. It was the caregiving, kids, and cash, because a lot of times we are not just emotionally and practically supporting two generations, but sometimes financially as well. We've got, maybe have kids in college, and we've got, older generations that we might be financially aiding as well. So it's a crunch on multiple levels, not just the physical part. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe it's just my algorithm of what I see because of what I do. But I feel like almost every other post I see is about the symptoms of menopause and the hormones and hormone replacement therapy versus not. But in your research, it was interesting. That was kind of lower on the list of concerns for women. It feels like it's this big, huge component of our midlife, but in reality, it wasn't striking women as much as you think it is.
That was one of the biggest findings of my research, because I too, and it's what we hear about as we're approaching midlife. All we hear is menopause and hot flashes. We don't hear about any of this other big stuff that's happening concurrently. But when I dissected, so it was pretty far down towards the bottom, as a ranking. But when I dissected the data more, one thing that I learned was that physical decline, which was the top challenge, also included symptoms of menopause that women were not necessarily connecting with menopause. So fatigue, brain fog, memory lapses, anxiety. A lot of women, until more recently with the flurry of information out there, weren't connecting those dots. I didn't connect those dots. I actually went to my doctor several times thinking that I had early onset dementia because of memory stuff. And my mother had dementia, and she kind of kept, you're fine, kind of kept dismissing it, only for me to learn a decade later, when it had subsided, that that's a very natural part of menopause. So I think on the one hand, menopause as a whole is lower than things like death and loss and caretaking. Menopause is happening concurrently, but in and of itself, I think it more speaks to the overarching challenges of those other things that are happening concurrent with menopause. So way more than hot flashes, way more.
Did you hear about the Women Mastering Midlife community but missed the enrollment window? Don't worry, your opportunity is coming again soon. Are you tired of feeling lost in the sea of conflicting menopause advice, struggling with symptoms that your doctor dismisses, wasting money on miracle products that don't deliver? The Women Mastering Midlife community is your solution. We offer expert guidance from a pharmacist and certified women's health coach, a supportive community who truly understands, research-backed resources at your fingertips, personalized strategies for nutrition, fitness, and overall well-being. But here's the catch. Our doors aren't always open. Don't miss your chance to transform your midlife journey. Sign up for our waitlist today at www.missvictoriabird.com/community or join the waitlist through the link in our show notes. Waitlist members will get first access when enrollment reopens, exclusive content until our next launch, and a special membership rate only for those on the waitlist. I'm Victoria Bird, a pharmacist and certified women's health coach who created the community I could have used when I began to experience symptoms of perimenopause. Not only have I spent years researching the menopause transition and working with clients, but I am also right alongside you in the thick of it. This community addresses the whole experience of midlife, and with a sense of belonging only a group of women can provide. Take control of your perimenopause experience. Join the waitlist now at www.missvictoriabird.com/community or find the link to the waitlist in our show notes below. The book talks about both the challenges and gifts of midlife. So what are some of the most significant gifts that women often overlook?
I love that you asked this, and I'm smiling because when I interviewed the women in my research, we would finish talking about the challenges like we just did. Then I'd say, tell me some of the gifts, and you'd see this big smile and their shoulders relax. And oh yeah, I forgot about those, but they're so good. So one of the obvious ones, which is not surprising, is wisdom, because we gather wisdom from unpacking life lessons. And the longer we live, the more life lessons we experience, the more experiences we have, we can extract that wisdom. So wisdom was kind of an obvious one, but some other really great ones were things like comfort in our skin and ease in our being, which goes with that skin being a bit more wrinkly or more saggy or not quite looking the way we want it to go. And even with that, we're so much more comfortable. By the way, physical appearance was also very close to the bottom of the listing of challenges, even though products marketed to us are all about wrinkle
Yes.
creams and things like that. Yes. So resilience was a big one. We've been through hard times. We've gotten through hard times, and we know that we have the muscle to do it. And with each hard time we go through, we build that muscle more. So resilience, comfort in our skin, more fulfilling friendships, become much more discerning with the people we choose to hang out with, the appreciation that life is short. And so we kind of tend to wean out those obligatory friendships that are not mutually fulfilling. Self-awareness. We know ourselves better. We know what we like, what we don't like, what we value. And with that greater self-awareness, we make better choices over what we want to do, what we want to get involved in, what we want to engage in. And so all of these things collectively kind of speak to just a more fulfilling life experience, one that where we have more agency and we're making more informed, wiser choices. And that's a beautiful thing, because when we kind of rid ourselves or lessen the people pleasing, the obligatory behaviors, the should behaviors, when those lessen, it's like it's a freedom, or there's a burden that came with all of that that we no longer struggle with, or don't struggle with as much. I'm going to say no longer, but much less. And those are
Yeah.
great.
Oh,
Yeah, those are great.
absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah,
to
I
those
agree.
women that aren't in menopause yet, remember this stuff comes at the same time. So allow that to sink in, that as you enter this difficult phase, you're also entering this phase that's just, awash in gifts.
Yeah, I feel like for every ad I see on an anti-aging cream, luckily for me, I see a post about just ridding yourself of that and how it's not as important as, they're making you believe, because it does feel like this intrinsic battle of, I don't want to say I don't care, but I don't really care if I get a new wrinkle or I get a new gray hair, but they're telling me I need to care. So to
Hey,
drop that struggle is so freeing.
exactly. They're telling you is the point. Society kind of, it's a little insulting how much they want us to think that physical appearance is still so high up, or even that what makes physical appearance attractive is youthful beauty, that, wrinkle lines of joy, laugh lines of joy don't count and aren't as aesthetically appealing. And so thankfully you're right, a lot of pro-aging, welcome, mature beauty and say yes to it coming out as much as wrinkle creams. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so thankful for that. And having teen daughters, I've also noticed for their generation a shift of body acceptance and appreciation that we didn't have when we were growing up. So I'm hoping they have a little less to unpack and dismantle when they're in their 40s and 50s than we did.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Sure.
Embrace the Middle, the name of the company in the book, was also part of my own kind of intention to embrace my growing belly. I didn't really ever have weight there. It kind of went other places. And so with menopause, I found that I had a little bit more of a belly than I ever had. And it was this kind of inner decision that, are you going to really beat yourself up? Like, aren't you done with that? Aren't you over that? Do you want to waste more time in body rejection? And so, no, I didn't. So it was also my declaration to embrace my literal middle along with whatever comes with those decades. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a natural evolutionary process of the belly fluff, the redistribution of weight. And I think we don't talk about that with women, that this is something that's naturally occurring in a lot of people. And the exhaustion of the moving target, of the ever moving, you finally get somewhere with your body or your acceptance of your body. And then, you just keep looking for the next change you can make to it. And I think that is just so exhausting.
I love that. The exhaustion of the ever moving target. You are so right. Because if it's a target that we're thinking is going to give us happiness, we'll never get to the end. We'll be on our deathbed kind of saying, where's that target? Oh, over there. Yeah. So I love how you put that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I look back at pictures from a year ago and I'm like, why was I so hell bent on changing? Like, I was good. I was strong. I was healthy. I was, self-sufficient. And I still was looking, I can remember wanting to change this or improve this. And it's like, man, when you finally let that go, it can be such a good way to continue your journey.
Liberating.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of that, you devote a chapter to changing the midlife paradigm. What are some key ways you think society's view of midlife women need to shift?
I think several of them we've touched on. One of them is these more open conversations about menopause. And shout out that World Menopause Day is October 18th.
Mhm.
So there actually, since 2009, there's been a whole movement dedicated to raising awareness about this. So having these conversations so that when women get into this and start having these kind of unusual symptoms, if they do, which is much earlier than hot flashes. It really starts during, well, you know this, it starts during
Mhm.
perimenopause. So that
Yeah.
when women start to enter that phase, we're not surprised, we're not scared, we don't think we have dementia like I did. So more open conversations, more unapologetic conversations, more conversations with mixed company so that we can have the support, not the dismissiveness of males as well. So I think more conversations about menopause and also for our own comfort and validation. When we talk about something, it's unburdening to have these conversations and validating. I mean, I found out so much of my information from sharing a conversation with my girlfriends. Oh, that happens to you too? Okay, maybe I'm not the only one that's having these like anxiety attacks, which I never had. So talking about menopause, the whole thing about beauty, welcoming midlife beauty, really honoring our own choices, supporting each other in our choices, whether we want to go gray, whether we want to get Botox, but just making sure that our choices are based on what we want and not from societal pressure around it. Another thing that I talk about in the book is the whole issue of ageism and sexism and this kind of intersection that happens. A lot of people in my research talked about the experience of invisibility and being talked above around them, like they're not even there anymore, and calling that out when we see it. And I was in a store the other day, a computer store, and I got there first and I kind of have my dog and I'm waiting. And then the guy comes out from the back and then he's there. And then another man walks in the door and he's like, oh, you have this to pick up, and goes to serve the man first. And I don't know if this was, I don't know why he did that, but I just said, excuse me, I was here first. And, I just wondered, was he doing that because he's a male or he looked more important? I don't know. But speaking up and calling that out when it happens and, celebrating other women in midlife and their accomplishments. I think one of the beauty of this phase is that we also have less of a scarcity complex. We can celebrate other successes because we know there's enough to go around and we can kind of lift each other up in solidarity. So really celebrating other women and pointing out what they're doing in midlife. And I think all of that challenges the perception, especially how we're portrayed in the media. I mean, I
Mhm.
think since I started writing this book, I've paid more attention and I'm blown away by the negative portrayals of women in the media. So really calling that out as well and not supporting those movies or those commercials or those products that continue to perpetuate this kind of frumpy, dumpy, pasture prime image and really highlight our power and showcase our power. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It is. It is. But, I was thinking about, I see a lot of reels being made of, I think it was that '70s show. I didn't watch it when it was out, but the mother was going through menopause. And, it was nice to see someone discussing that she was experiencing the change. But at the same time, there's part of me that cringes because I feel like they're also displaying her as this crazy, off the rails, like emotionally unstable woman. And that's that it's not to be laughed at all the time. And so I appreciate the acknowledgement of it, but at the same time, in the method and the message it was putting out there, I don't think it really serves women at the end of the day.
100%. It's kind of like saying, oh, she's got her period. Don't mind her. She just has her period. She's
Mhm.
in menopause. It's a very dismissive pathologizing, like something's wrong with us with something that is very natural. And I used to see the '70s show and I don't remember that, but I'm going to go back and look at it in some of these reels. That's interesting. But I think that needs to be replaced with compassionate understanding as
Hmm.
opposed to judgment and pathologizing of a very normal experience.
And we do have so much to offer. There's so many women that I see writing books and starting businesses, and they're contributing in ways they weren't able to before, possibly because their time was spent with their younger children. I know I had to, during the pandemic, step out of what I was planning to do with my career and be a homeschool mom for 2 years, which is never on my plan. But it's very consuming to have small children, and you keep putting things on the back burner, but then as they become their own people, it gives us way to use our creativity and use our experience. And I think that there's a lot of women that could use the message of now is the time to put it out there and not be afraid of it.
Could not agree more. I think of midlife as almost a reckoning of, I had a major career shift at 50. I'm now 59. I was in working as a forensic psychologist, going into jails and testifying in court, which was a great job when my kids were younger because I could be at school during the day and go to jails at night. My clients weren't going anywhere. But it was also it was also a it was also a career that I grew out of. It sucked the life force out of me instead of feeding me. It depleted me. That was the word, depleted me. And it was really when my oldest daughter got a driver's license that my mom role materially changed. And I had the space because that was very important to me to drive my kids and pick them up from school and be involved in the field trips and be on the PTA and all of that. And so when that naturally changed, it was my window. And it's a hard thing to do when you're approaching, we have a mastery of competence that comes with midlife too, which is a great thing. And so many of us think, but I'm so good at this. And how can I start something new? And it's lucrative. And I went through that for years and years going, but I'm so good at it. And it's flexible and I make a lot of money, but I'm unhappy. And there's that balance there. And so I think for women that are in careers or in relationships or whatever, midlife is almost this natural reckoning of it's now or never. Like we have enough time, hopefully, ahead of us to make these big changes. But if we wait another decade, that time is going to slip by, and to just kind of take that plunge. Because I knew for me, if I didn't switch careers, it would be a lifelong regret. And I knew that loud and clear. So it was just kind of taking the courage to leave something solid and venture into the unknown. It was worth it. So
Yeah,
worth
well,
it.
and for women who are listening that still have smaller children, some of us, I feel like there's a lot of us still having kids older in our age
Yes.
that are, so that we still have young children. There's light at the end of the tunnel when you feel like all my life is ever going to be is children or XYZ. There is definitely a space to expand yourself that's coming on the horizon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And your kids are always central to your life. I mean, mine are
Mhm.
21 and 23, and they were both just home, and you have these beautiful more adult like relationships. That's just, you think in your mind, oh, but it's not the same. It can't be as good. It's awesome. It's different, but it's wonderful. So your mom, I still think of me being a mom as my number one most important role. And feel like I've also arrived in a professional way that serves me. So yes, there's hope, and enjoy your time with your kids. Enjoy your time
Yes.
with your kids. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And because it can be tough when they're younger and it can feel like you're in the grind. But then as they get older, I definitely feel like I love my children at this age. And every time we get to a new stage, I'm like, man, I thought I liked them before, but I like them now a little bit more, I think. So
I know
that's
exactly
also a
what you
nice
mean.
evolution.
Yeah. 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 It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
So, if what advice would you give to women who are struggling to find meaning or direction in this stage of life? So, women who don't have that aha moment of this is what I want to be doing with my life. What do you suggest for them?
I think know that it is uncomfortable. And it's kind of a liminal period. And I was in it too, because, if you have kids, as your kids get older and that mom role diminishes, there's this void there. Who am I and what's next? And if a career, maybe you haven't been working in a formal way, your main job has been your kids. What am I going to do now? That's a big deal. I think for one, give yourself some grace, because it's hard to hang out with discomfort. It's not comfortable to be in
Yeah.
discomfort. But I think by rushing into something because we want to avoid the discomfort of this liminal space is not allowing a natural unfolding to happen. So I would say don't rush to figure out what's next. Don't even do an active process. I think be open to what really makes you happy. And if you have the space to not work for a little bit or to volunteer or do something, stay open-hearted, stay open-minded, take a class, explore. For me, meditation, which I'd been doing for 20 years, I knew that process of mindfulness was so much of how I did life. I had to integrate it into the next professional place. So maybe there's something you love. Maybe it's art. Maybe it's nature. Maybe there's something that you intrinsically love that then can be kind of morphed into something professionally. But don't rush to get there. Honor the space and see what unfolds. Because remember, wisdom and self-awareness is our top strengths. So we have a lot of that internally, and tapping into that and being present to what might unfold is a beautiful combination, a natural evolution.
Yeah. So many times we hear hustle culture. Like, I feel like hustle culture was so ingrained when I was younger. And, when I stepped out of being a pharmacist when my 13-year-old was born, I'm still active. I still have active licenses, but I haven't practiced in an actual pharmacy setting since then. And I just remember feeling so like, go, go, go. You have to hustle to the next thing. Even if you're tired, keep going, keep grinding. And the idea of sitting and just being still and like letting things progressively naturally happen, to me, is a foreign concept. And
I
so
think
it's kind of an
to most
unlearning.
people. Absolutely. I mean, society doesn't applaud stillness. Society applauds, accomplishments and doing and doing and doing. And so we bought into that, and we live in this culture where we can be doing 1,000 things at one time. And it is very much an undoing. And stillness doesn't have to start with, a half an hour in a meditation cushion. Stillness can just be taking 3 breaths. Stillness can just, be a moment of you're feeling that anxious pull to write an email or Google something or something because I can't stand this helpless, undirectional feeling. And stillness is literally taking 3 breaths, getting kind of tuning into that discomfort, and then Google, and then send the email. But there'll be a material difference from even just taking those seconds to step back a little bit. Because it also slows down. It slows down our central nervous system. So, it slows down the process.
Yeah, that's a tangible thing anybody can do. Does it? There's no
3
tools
breaths.
required. Yeah.
No, 3. People always say, I don't know how to meditate. I can't. My mind doesn't stop. And, my answer is, if you can breathe, you can meditate. And we don't want our minds to stop because that means we're alive. We just want to direct our attention so that we're not incessantly spinning.
We could do that. So if readers take
you
away
just did it. It sounds like you just did it,
know,
Victoria. You're like, ooh.
So if readers could take away one message from your book, Embrace the Middle, what would you hope it would be?
Oh, can I have 2? Okay, I'll start with 1.
Absolutely. No, you can have 2. It's your book.
1 is that the top one would be something that you really highlighted in our conversation was be mindful of all the gifts and enjoy them. The challenges can be so consuming and myopic, make our focus really myopic because they're louder. We're having a hot flash, nothing else exists. We hear cancer diagnosis and all of a sudden nothing else exists. So really, I call it widening our lens to really be open and present to and simmer in all those gifts. Celebrate your accomplishments. Notice them, for one. A lot of times you even notice them. Celebrate them, notice them, be intentional about paying attention to them. That's one thing. And the other thing is that though we don't have a choice regarding some things that are going to happen in midlife, we're going to confront losses. We're going to hit menopause. It may be a blip, but we're going to hit it. Our kids hopefully will launch. That's actually a good thing. We don't have a choice about those things happening, but we have absolute control over how we choose to respond to those things. And that is in your power. And we can respond by either pushing them away, or we can gently lean in with compassion. So opening up to the gifts and remembering that we have the choice for how to respond to our midlife evolution.
Those are great. Those are great takeaways. And so thank you for coming today and talking with me. I think that anyone out there who is actually listening, who is listening to this podcast should absolutely purchase your book. It's a great read. There's so many tools and insights in it. And I'll put in the show notes a link to the book and a link to your website and your socials, and so that people can, reach out to you.
And I'm holding it up just for the viewers to see.
I love it. It was my husband. It was funny because my husband kind of walked by and he looked at my book and he was like, And then he kind of flipped, like he was fanning the pages a little bit. And I was like, do you want to embrace the middle?
I think husbands should read it, because I think men should read it, because it will give them a much more informed perspective about the many things we're going through. I mean, they see externally, but they may not appreciate internally. So I think it's a great book for men to read.
Yeah. I'll have to, I'll put it on his desk. I'll leave it annotated with some highlights and some tabs for him so he could, if he wants the Cliff's notes, I'll just make
That's perfect.
Well, thank you again. And like I said, I love the book. It really helped. It served me this weekend. I was so glad I got to read it. And I look forward to seeing what's coming next down the pike for you.
Thank you, Victoria. I really appreciate being on your show and your wonderful illuminating questions. And so happy that you found the book illuminating. So thank you. It was wonderful to chat with you.
Thanks so much for joining me today. We will be back next week for another episode of Women Mastering Midlife. Until then, find us on Instagram at Women Mastering Midlife or Miss Victoria Bird, and join us in the Women Mastering Midlife community to continue our discussions. You'll find links to what you've heard here today, as well as ways to connect with us in the show notes below. This podcast is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. Please note the hosts, guests, and experts featured on this podcast are not your personal healthcare providers, life coaches, or advisors. The content should not be considered as professional, personalized medical, psychological, or prescriptive advice. This podcast is not a substitute for consulting your physician, therapist, local pharmacist, or relevant professionals to discuss your specific concerns and situation. The topics discussed should not be used as the sole basis to diagnose or treat any medical condition, make significant life changes, or make important decisions regarding your health otherwise. Women Mastering Midlife is not responsible for any undesired outcomes resulting from actions taken based on the information provided in this podcast. The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guests only and do not represent any of those other individuals or entities. Always consult with qualified professionals before making significant changes to your health, regimen, lifestyle, or medical plans.